So now that we have a basic idea of 106's outward appearance, let's try to answer the question of who or what exactly is he? When we first step into the role of Subject 106, we find him as an amnesiac. His memories have been completely erased and there is absolutely no information whatsoever about his life prior to Site-14. But of course there is more than enough room for theorizing. Okay, so what we know is that Subject 106 is evidently the 106th iteration of the Syndicate's Cycle program. The Cycle program, as we currently understand it, is a top-secret initiative specifically delegated to one of the Syndicate's paramilitary task forces, Task Force 27. Very long and fascinating story short, the Cycle program is the system that the Syndicate uses to maintain world domination through the genetic engineering of extremely powerful brainwashed human clones called cycles. Subject 106 is one of these cycles and was created for the specific purpose of terminating two previous iterations of the Cycle program, Subject 91 and Subject 78. At some point after his creation, 106 was captured by Horizon forces and taken to Site-14, where he would be experimented on for some time before Subject 105 eventually rescues him and kickstarts the events of the game. And that's about all I can say for 106's life before Site-14. I mean, like I said, there's basically nothing concrete about what he got up to before we get to play as him, and I don't even know what exactly the details surrounding the creation of cycles are. Like if they're born as actual infants or if they come straight out of the synthetic womb as fully formed adults. 107 was certainly created as an adult, but he strikes me as kind of a break from the norm, and he was also being mass-produced it seems, so I don't know what's going on with him. The circumstances surrounding 106's capture by Horizon are also of some debate in the community as well, since given how ridiculously strong he is, some people speculate that he was in some way handed over to them by Task Force 27 themselves. I can definitely see where this theory is coming from, because the only times we ever see 106 really get bested by anything is when he gets caught off guard or if he's up against an ancient eldritch being with boundless power. Supporters of this theory suggest that 106 was given to Horizon with the knowledge that they would torture and experiment on him, which in turn would fuel his rage against them for the duration of his mission, but I don't really buy that, since other cycles seem to accomplish their tasks just fine without needing to be motivated. It's my belief that 106 really was simply captured by a group of skilled Talon operators and other mercenaries, and then the game starts an indeterminate amount of time afterwards. But overall, 106's history outside of Site-14 is deeply enigmatic and never really expanded on by the game, so I don't really think there's much point in discussing it any further here. Now, as for what actually happened at Site-14, that we do know quite a bit more about. Now, as many people have said before, the tutorial mission of Trepang Squared serves not only to introduce the player to its gameplay mechanics and all that, but also emphasize the running theme of the game that the character you play as is no ordinary human being, to say the least. When I first played, I was really hooked by the way 106 was talked about over the intercom and in the intel logs, because they describe him less like a human and more like some kind of weird cryptid, and the whole level is very effectively designed to make you feel like a monster breaking out of its cage. It's also probably the single most important level when it comes to information on 106 himself, because it has some of the only intel logs in the game that actually talk specifically about him. However, 106 wasn't just being contained at Site-14. As I said earlier, he was being actively experimented on, and the numerous intel logs he can find elaborate on what exactly Horizon was trying to do with him. So the first intel log that actually mentions him is the scientist briefing, where the researchers arriving at Site-14 are told of Subject 106's capture and what to expect when they go down to see him in the loading bay. The briefing states that 106 is suspected to have very unique anomalous properties, as it was reported by the guards who captured him that he can dodge bullets and turn invisible, among other things. Now that's basically it as far as this log goes, but one last thing I want to mention here, and I know this has really nothing to do with 106 himself, but I might not get a chance to say it for a while. I just want to say that I really love the way these intel logs showcased a little bit of friction between the security personnel and the researchers. A lot of the Horizon Black sites seem to have this issue where the scientists and guards are always at odds with each other, and it's always just really funny to see the scientists passive-aggressively call the guards stupid and the guards call the scientists eggheads or nerds. It's just a great simple dynamic, and another example of this game's very underappreciated writing. But anyway, the first intel log we're really gonna look at here is the Subject 106 Preliminary Observations report written by the Site-14 research director Dr. Ken Takaguchi. I think that's how you pronounce that. This observation report details, as the name suggests, a series of basic inspections that were carried out before more personnel could arrive at Site-14 and actual testing on 106 could begin. The report reveals that he needs to be restrained with experimental titanium handcuffs rated for 25,000 pounds due to his superhuman strength, and that his blood tests indicate he experienced extreme spikes in dopamine levels after he was able to inflict physical trauma on the guards. Now that last bit was interesting because not only does it tell us that 106 is psychologically conditioned to derive pleasure from killing people, it also serves as the in-universe explanation for the adrenaline boost he gets after killing an enemy in combat, but I'll discuss that more later when I go over his gameplay elements. Anyway, getting back to the report, after it talks about the handcuffs and dopamine, it concludes with a brief statement that to my knowledge is the only time in the entire game that someone actually acknowledges the fact that 106 never speaks. The implication here, as a matter of fact, is not only that 106 doesn't speak, but also that he might be physically incapable of doing so for some reason, since physical, psychological, and even medical interrogation techniques, whatever that means, were all unable to force him into communicating. Undeterred, the researchers then moved on to the next step of their investigation into 106's origins, a memory transplant attempt. See, Site-14 is implied to be far bigger than what we actually get to see of it in-game, and 106 was almost certainly not the only thing they were studying there. Another very long story short, one of the other research initiatives being conducted at Site-14 was called the Whole Brain Emulation Project, which centered around the idea of trying to digitally simulate an entire human brain. Now, I want to emphasize here that from my analysis, the overarching goal of the project seemed to be not in the digital creation of an entirely new human brain, but in the replication of a brain already belonging to a living person. However, even in the year 2035, the technology in the Trepang universe is simply not enough to accomplish a task as monumental as simulating an entire human brain using only computers. But what they do have in this universe is a far greater understanding of how human memories work. In an email written by Dr. Takaguchi addressed to Horizon CEO Anton Lazar, Dr. Takaguchi suggests a new method of emulating a human brain using the same technology they have for memory transplants, revealing that in the Trepang universe, Horizon has the technology to move memories around from brain to brain, and now you can probably see where this is going. After getting nowhere with interrogating Subject 106, Dr. Takaguchi and the other researchers at Site-14 decided that they would try to use some of this technology to simulate 106's brain using the brain of another human being, and that's exactly what they did. In what was probably one of the most heinous experiments carried out by Horizon that we know of, the researchers at Site-14 took 2 human test subjects from one of their end-of-life care facilities, the Pandora Institute, and transplanted 106's memories into their brains. One of the test subjects just died on the spot, but the other test subject actually survived a partial memory transplant and began muttering about quote-unquote completing the cycle before trying to attack everyone around him and being killed by security staff. So this intel log seems to suggest that before we get to play as him at Site-14, 106 may have been even more murderous and unhinged than what we actually get to see. As a matter of fact, to further expand on this point, I actually want to take us over to the old demo of Trepang Squared released in 2019. Now, the actual degree of canonicity that intel documents from the demo have in regards to the official story of Trepang Squared is up for debate since they didn't carry over to the actual game release, but I still think they'd be interesting to share here. The only one I really want to talk about anyway is the October 14th incident report form because it helps emphasize my earlier point about 106 being more like a wild animal as opposed to a person. This report was written by a Site-14 security guard named Arnie Jackson after a routine feeding procedure for Subject 106 went wrong. Arnie and his partner, Chris Isaac, both went to 106's chamber to give him some food, but 106 suddenly grabbed hold of Chris and strangled him while Arnie was unable to help due to his lack of a weapon and 106's superhuman strength. Chris's neck was snapped by 106 and he died before backup could arrive, and the incident report ends with Arnie nonchalantly recommending that they should use tasers from now on. Keep in mind here that as I tell you all this crazy stuff, I'm not talking about like some monster enemy or the boss of a level. This is the protagonist of the game. This is the guy you play as. Eventually, either after they gave up on trying to figure out his origins or they actually learned everything they needed to from him, 106's memories were were erased by Horizon and he was administered a special brainwashing treatment called Serenity. Now, once again, Serenity is yet another amazing topic within the game that's very closely related not only to 106 himself, but also to many of the game's core themes, so it definitely deserves its own section later in the video, but for right now, just know that Serenity is a state of mind that 106 can be placed into to render him docile, and it's probably the main reason why he's able to be freely transported throughout Site-14 in nothing but handcuffs and a wheelchair. However, as you've seen, in the opening cutscene of the game, Subject 105 shoots the television that was keeping 106 in Serenity, and then the game begins. And that is almost all that can be said about 106's history that we know of, but there are actually two more very loaded voice lines that make reference to his past outside of Site-14, and these two lines are spoken by none other than Anton Lazar himself. Now, the big reveal of Trepang Squared is basically that Anton Lazar, Mr. Jeff Bezos' Amazon, is a cycle just like 106, and the entire time he was the one who was made by the Syndicate so that he could make Horizon. In what I think is one of the strangest moments of the game, when 106 is knocked unconscious after a brief fight with the Mothman at the Pandora Institute, Anton Lazar personally radios him to express his disappointment and tell him that he was never supposed to be a weapon.
Not even 1 week since your escape, and you've already destroyed one of my facilities. Allow me to make one thing clear, Six. You were never supposed to be a weapon.
Now again, like I said, this is a loaded voice line. It's very well acted and it begs you to think about it more, but everything I said earlier seems to pretty effectively contradict what Lazar is saying here. Some theorize that Lazar had plans for 106 at Site-14 and that he wanted him to stay in Serenity forever. Others think he is commenting on 106's actual nature as a human being, but I can't give a concrete answer on anything. What I can tell you is that Wilson said there were supposed to be more lines like this where Lazar would talk to 106 directly, but apparently they were having too much trouble fitting these little scenes in, so they basically scrapped the idea entirely. Honestly, that's a shame. This line is packed with juicy subtext, and it's a great way to build the relationship between the player as 106 and Anton Lazar as the villain, but this is the only one we ever got like this. The other voice line is a little bit less interesting, and it's said by Lazar when 106 enters the penthouse arena of the Horizon HQ mission.
Six, what have they done to you?
So this line also implies that Lazar seems to know more about 106's history than even he does, but 106 of course had no comment on the matter, and we all know what happened next. Alright, so that's gonna be it for this section. I think I covered basically everything I could, and what little we do know about 106's past does an impeccable job characterizing him as the beastly force of nature we all love and hate playing as. And speaking of playing as him, Subject 106 is the sole protagonist of Trepang Squared. The player will never control anyone or anything else in the game besides him for its entire duration. 106 is a combat cycle engineered to be a single-minded killing machine, and his genetic engineering affords him a variety of superhuman abilities, including but definitely not limited to vastly heightened reflexes, a ridiculous degree of physical strength, significantly improved hand-eye coordination and dexterity, increased durability, the power to turn invisible at will along with any objects he's holding as long as they're inanimate, and probably even quite a few more. To put it simply, he is a human wood chipper that annihilates everything in his way, and both you and him will love every second of it, unless the two of you are being made to commit war crimes, but we'll get to that part later. 106 is without a doubt one of the most versatile, responsive, user-friendly, and just all-around fun protagonists I've ever been able to play as. Easy to learn, easy to master, there's no weird buttons you have to get used to, there's no special combos, he doesn't have any clumsy input lag, he's got 4 new abilities, everything else you already know about and you're already used to because we've all been playing FPS games for years now. If I was to try and summarize what it's like playing as 106, I'd say, well, imagine yourself if you were a collapsing neutron star. Trepang Squared's gameplay substantially rewards an aggressive playstyle. 106 is not meant to sit behind cover and slowly peek out, picking off enemies one by one. The more he runs around and kills things, the easier it becomes for him to run around and kill more things. Environments, enemies, and 106 himself are designed in a way that makes sitting in one spot to funnel enemies basically impossible. If you try that, not only will it take forever and you won't complete the objective, you'll probably die anyway. You need to stay right in the action and keep constantly killing things, giving both you and 106 dopamine shots which will let you keep fighting and fighting until you eventually win. And staying in the action is only possible thanks to 106's 4 main abilities. The first of 106's new abilities is his cloak, a simple but incredibly effective and useful tool that you will have no trouble at all figuring out. Press a key and 106 turns invisible. Well, actually not completely invisible. When I first played in Site 14, I thought it only made him harder to detect because you can clearly still see his outline, but nope, when 106 is cloaked, he is 100% undetectable to all enemies. You can even bump into them and they still won't see you. His outline being visible is probably what he sees when he's invisible, and it's also probably there for you as the player to also be able to see him and not get confused, because it would be pretty weird if he really did just completely disappear and you were running around not being able to see your own body. To other people, 106 cloaking most likely looks something much closer to this, which is what the Emerson clones look like when they turn invisible. Regardless, 106's cloak is stupendous because it's great for repositioning and it's very easy to use aggressively, but it's not a get out of jail free card. You are invisible, not invincible. When you cloak, enemies won't instantly stop shooting at you. If you run in the wrong direction, you're dead. Cloak can give you some breathing room, but if you use it wrong, you'll be punished for it. This is most evident in the fact that after you cloak, you must wait a minimum period of time before you can cloak again, so you can't just spam it and run around half invisible all the time. 106 also can't attack when he's cloaked, so as soon as you melee or fire a weapon, he'll uncloak and he becomes visible again. All in all, it's straightforward, well balanced, and fun, and it helps reinforce 106's character as this eerie spectral monster who you probably won't even see coming before it's too late. The next ability of 106 is his superhuman focus, which enables him to enter a state of being where the world appears to slow down around him, an ability directly inspired by the Point Man's very similar reflex mode from Fear. When 106 focuses, everything around him, including his weapons, will slow down, and his vision will even increase in contrast so that he and the player can see what's happening with more clarity. However, 106's movements, like his reloads, his sword swings, or his kicks, don't seem to slow down at the same rate everything else does, which suggests that when he focuses, he himself actually increases in speed relative to the world. While he's focused, 106 even sees bullets moving slower, and if he's using a sword, he can deflect them back towards his attackers. Focus is a very powerful tool in 106's arsenal and works quite a bit differently than Cloak does. Firstly, Focus does not recharge automatically like Cloak does. Instead, 106 can only gain more focus by killing enemies outside of Focus, which serves as the core gameplay element that encourages the player to stay in the mix. More killing equals more focus, and more focus equals more killing. Now, because of this, Focus needs to be used a little more carefully than Cloak, since you can't rely on it to recharge on its own, and if you run out of focus at a bad time, you can quickly find yourself in a pretty tough situation. However, unlike Cloak, which makes you wait before you can use it again, 106 can focus focus for a certain amount of time, unfocus, and then focus again whenever he wants as long as he still has additional focus. There's not really any cooldown period, so because of this the player is punished much less for using it at the wrong time, since you can focus and unfocus whenever you want without having to wait for it to recharge like you do with the cloak. You can sort of feather it too, like quickly go in and out of focus, but I don't think it's as effective and it's really not necessary. Focus is pretty simple. It basically serves as a direct upgrade to 106's ability to kill things, effectively decreasing enemy speed and reaction times and letting him cut down droves of them with ease. It is stupendous, and without it his job would be far more difficult. The next ability 106 has is thanks to his lack of empathy and his superhuman strength, which combine to form the infamous Trepang squared hostage system. Remember what I said earlier about 106 not being supposed to sit behind cover all day? You know why? Because that guy right there, that's your cover. The hostage system adds so much depth to 106's gameplay and also reinforces a core design element of the game's enemies in that they want to kill 106 but they also don't want to die themselves. If 106 sneaks up behind an enemy, or if an enemy is staggered and off balance, he can then take the enemy hostage as long as they are not a juggy or an armored HVT and choose to do one of four things. He can use them as a shield while he keeps fighting, he can execute them, he can throw them, or he can pull the pin on one of their grenades and then throw them before it detonates. Thrown hostages will knock over or stagger enemies they are thrown into as long as they are not armored HVTs or juggies, and kills using hostages all count towards 106's focus level. The first time 106 grabs a hostage, enemies will not shoot at him unless they're able to flank around to get a better shot, so it's a great way for 106 to give himself some breathing room in a fight or just as a way to get some easy focus. However, if 106 takes a hostage again after he's already taken one previously, enemies will just shoot at him right away because they know the hostage is gonna die regardless, meaning that he can't really use them as a form of escape anymore. At that point, it's best to just get rid of hostages as soon as possible, either by killing or tossing them, since while holding a hostage, 106's movement is significantly slowed. If the hostage 106 is holding gets killed, he does this little ugh thing with his hand and then he's able to move at his normal speed again. It's interesting to note that 106 can't cloak with a hostage, but when he takes one, the hostage will stay completely silent and won't say a word, so grabbing a hostage actually won't take you out of stealth if you can do it without being noticed. 106 also can't take friendly units hostage unless he does something to piss them off, so you'll never have to worry about accidentally taking one of your buddies hostage and having no choice but to throw or kill him. You can have a lot of fun with the hostage system, and it's yet another aspect of the gameplay that reinforces a core theme of 106's character, in that he has very little regard for human suffering and that he can also be a real weaselly piece of shit. The last special ability I'll discuss here is 106's physics-defying omnidirectional sliding. Now, just like any other game, if you are sprinting and you press the crouch button, 106 will begin sliding for a bit before standing up again. However, the slide ability can also be bound to a separate key on your keyboard or button on your controller instead of just using the crouch key or button, meaning that if he's standing on the ground, 106 can slam his ass down and enter a slide at any time, regardless if he was moving previously or not. He can slide in absolutely any direction you choose, and he can still shoot, jump, throw grenades, melee, and most importantly, grab hostages while he is sliding. This is crucial because if 106 slides into an enemy that is not a juggy or armored HVT, the enemy will go flying and enter a staggered state, meaning that 106 can slide into an enemy and quickly grab him to use him as a hostage. A simple and very effective combination I like to call slide grabbing that serves as my bread and butter whenever I need to keep things moving in a fight. It also comes in handy when you're low on ammo, since you don't need to shoot anybody for slide grabbing, and it's relatively low risk since if you can grab the hostage in time and you haven't killed one previously, enemies will stop shooting at you and you can control the tempo again. 106's slide is a very powerful and versatile ability of his that you can use offensively or defensively, and it can be combined with focus, cloak, and of course the hostage system, among many other things as well. Now, the next aspects of 106's gameplay I don't really consider special abilities, but they are still very important to the way he's played, so they definitely deserve a little bit of discussion here. First off, another unique design intricacy of 106 is that he cannot run backwards. As a matter of fact, not only can he not run backwards, when he moves backwards, he does it extremely slowly. This is yet another simple gameplay element that encourages the player to never slow down and also serves as a way to punish the player if they walk into a bad situation, since if you don't have of cloak or enough stamina for a slide, you're basically stuck for a few milliseconds, which is sometimes all it takes for you to get killed. 106's stamina is another important aspect of his gameplay, and when I first played, I was disappointed and confused at how quickly he got gassed from just sprinting for a few seconds, but his stamina regeneration is near instant. When his stamina depletes, you only have to wait a second or maybe even less before it starts to quickly regenerate, and you can even sprint again before it fully regenerates, so there's no little cooldown period like with Cloak. Performing melee attacks while walking or stationary doesn't deplete his stamina at all, but basically any physical action while sliding or running will quickly deplete it. However, after killing an enemy, 106's stamina becomes overcharged, and he has an unlimited amount of it as long as he keeps killing things. So if he is constantly killing, then he literally has infinite stamina, yet another design element that rewards the player for playing aggressively. And on the topic of melee attacks, 106 has a pretty small but very versatile arrangement. He has your standard butt smack melee attacks that he'll perform when stationary or when he isn't sprinting. He has a speedy little teep kick that he'll do when running or in the air, and of course he has his famous drop kick that he'll do if you hold the melee and sprint buttons after jumping while sprinting. Now 106's kicks are so powerful that if he kicks a hard surface like a ground or Now, 106's kicks are so powerful that if he kicks a hard surface like the ground or a wall, he'll actually bounce off of it. If you aim a dropkick at the ground or an enemy that's lower than you, 106 will go flying, and it can be a really helpful movement technique that lets you quickly get to higher levels of an environment. Now, 106 doesn't carry any momentum when he's on the ground. He can stop and start on a dime, but while in the air, he does, and something interesting I noticed is that if you jump with momentum and pause the game, he'll lose all his momentum and just fall straight down. I wonder if that's on purpose. Regardless, aside from not being able to go backwards, when he's moving, 106 is wonderfully fluid. There's basically nothing whatsoever short of running straight into a wall that will slow him down. He can reload cancel, he can reload while sliding or running, he can kick while he's reloading or shooting, he can slide under a lot of objects, he can slide and then jump, he can shoot while sliding, he can slide then jump then drop kick, all while he's still shooting, and if he hits the ground before he finishes a dropkick animation, instead of just falling over, he just goes into a slide and keeps on moving. But my all-time favorite little thing he does is that if you run towards a surface to get over it, most of the time 106 will do that standard video game one-handed vault, but if you're at a certain height with momentum, 106 will do a quick little hop clean over the surface and keep his momentum. I mean, there's only so many different ways I can say that he's just really simple and intuitive to control without ever being boring. The devs are not looking to trip you up with any weird input rules. He just can't run backwards, that's it. He also doesn't have too many buttons to remember, as I said earlier, so you're never going to be making pretzels out of your fingers, and if you're on PC, I really recommend getting a mouse with those buttons on the side, because if you bind the slide key to one of those side mouse buttons, dude, you're going to go to a different dimension. 106's slide being bound to a different key instead of the usual sprinting crouch thing that every other game has does wonders to open up his movement system. However, something new players will quickly realize is that 106 cannot aim down the sights on his guns and that he is wildly inaccurate with automatic weapons. Yes, it does make very little sense that the ultra powerful super soldier killer guy has the same amount of recoil control as a stumbling toddler, but it is, you guessed it, just another design element to make sure the player does not cower behind cover and that they actually get up in the enemy's faces to stay in the action. 106 can also dual wield weapons when he finds the dual wield serum in Jorvik Castle. Yeah, actually he doesn't start the game being able to do that for some reason. He has to